Hello everyone. This week we will talk about the impact of innovation on employment as well as on economic growth. We will start with innovation and employment. Short outline of how I plan to cover this topic. I'll give you a brief idea about the historical context and the debates and the controversies that have emerged in history. We will look at the neo-Schumpeterian and evolutionary approach towards aligning the changes in the technology with the employment related demands. We will also understand the economic analysis. One very important point that come forward in this debate is the quality of the job. We will have a look at that also. We will talk about few stylized facts as the literature on this topic is very diverse, and we also realize that there are various conditioning factors which will play the role in terms of the impact of any major technological change on the employment. But what are the few stylized facts we get from understanding this vast literature will be highlighted. Now, in the 21st century, what we are experiencing is a kind of a conflict between the automation and the employment opportunities that are available. So, we will look at those debates and how automation is going to influence the employment opportunities. In most cases, we will talk about the Indian case also. So, look at there has been a long standing debate, or you can say conflict, between the technological change, that is the change that has come maybe in the way the things are being done, the new processes that are being introduced, the new machines that have come, vis-a-vis the people who have been employed in the earlier techniques, or who were very well versed with the earlier ways of doing things, now find it difficult to get used to the newer one. Moreover, the newer one may also lead to a certain amount of redundancy with respect to the utilization of the same labor. So, as a result, you may find that the labor may not be as much required in the newer techniques as maybe in the earlier one. So, moving more towards a capital intensive technological change. So, in that context, a very popular concern is from the Luddites. This Luddites effectively is nowadays is a blanket term which is given to those people whom you realize that they dislike new technology. They do not appreciate the newer technology as such. Moreover, what you also find that when it comes to this kind of a word or Luddite, it doesn't come from something which is very 21st century. Rather, it comes from a 19th century labor movement which was against the way the mechanized manufacturers and their unskilled laborer, they were undermined because of the skilled craftsmen of that particular day. Newer and newer techniques were coming forward, new machines, mechanized looms, knitting frames were being created, and as a result you find that the original Luddites were basically the British weavers and the textile workers. And there was a kind of an economic pressure of the Napoleonic Wars also, and apart from that, the new technologies which were coming forward. So weavers began breaking into factories, smashing textile in the machines, and they were naming themselves a Luddite basically after Ned Ludd, a young apprentice in a textile firm. There were major instances of what you call as a machine breaking in Nottingham in 1811, and also burning of the factories, the gunfires were being exchanged. In fact, in April 1812, what you find is this kind of an unrest was reaching its peak. Then clearly there was a pushback from the state, and you find that the army was deployed and several thousand of them were rounded up, and few dozens were also hanged, and another were transported to Australia. So by the 1813 you find the resistance has rather reduced or almost kind of vanished. But what you find once again in the 20th century, the name re-entered, and it is being kind of put as a synonym to what you call as a technophobe. Like we said, the idea that the technology will take away the employment opportunities which are available in the market. So clearly there is this conflict, there is this tussle between the change in the way things are being done and the way the labor has been organized, because the way the things are being done, the technologies that are being used, the processes that are being used, the machines that are being used, if they change, it really creates a, a gap for the various labor who have now gotten used to do the things the earlier way. That effectively mean that some kind of a reskilling, some kind of a bridging of the gap may be needed in order to deal with that. But is that all? Is this sufficient? Is the question that we will try to address in the talk today. So if you look at the impact of, or you want to understand the impact of technological change on employment, you find that clearly there is a sustained and sustainable growth when we talk about newer technologies, and that may require a two-way adjustment. What are those two-way adjustments? First is yet that old economic and social structures, you may find that they might exist for a certain period of a time. So now we have been witnessing this shift towards the electric vehicle. It is not that on one day the government wakes up and say that now no more older vehicles will run. It cannot happen like that. There is a so-called transition period. In the transition period, you will find as slowly the newer technology products come in the market, the vehicles are now coming in, people are getting used to it, they are getting used to the problems that comes with those vehicles, and also how to charge them, how to go about them, in while the older structures are continuing to exist. So in a short run, what you find is that there is a demand which keep on existing and remains for the employees of the earlier, let us say, technologies, or earlier the way the things were being done. Now what happens is that over a period of a time, in the long run, definitely there is going to be a major shift. There is going to be a overhaul of the way the things has been done. So it is only in the long run that you will be able to understand what happened in this particular adjustment problem. So you can understand, like in early 90s, there was video cassettes which were very popular to watch movies, and they kept on existing for a long time. There used to be specific shops, you can go there, you can take those video cassettes on rent, and over a period of a time, clearly when CDs came, then the CD were being used in order to watch those movies. So the shops kind of shifted from those video cassettes to the CDs. Clearly now with the OTT platforms, both the structures which were existing earlier are now being dismantled. However, they continued for some time period. The transition did happen, and also they were existing at some point in both were existing till the point when the long run change was actually being introduced. So if you want to understand how this happens and how it has been studied, clearly what you find is this in the literature. So in Adam Smith, we have already talked about, does talk about division of labor, and it will have an labor saving effect, because essentially we are looking at this division of labor, which is now going to bring in more and more efficiency in the way the things are being done as such. Then there is Malthus, who does talk about the positive effect, because what was being witnessed at that point of a time when during Malthus was a great uptake or great increase in the demand in the British in Britain at that point of a time. So learning from that, one can see that yes, maybe the technological change is going to bring in more demand dynamics and will have a positive impact on the employment generated. JB Say, as per his own idea of Say's law, advocated that ultimately the market will adjust. But what we found, which we have already discussed, is this Luddite struggle, a mechanization leading to job losses and requirement for the new skills to be created. So the de-skilling is happening. That means the reskill also has to be supported. Of course, one of the most prominent thinker in this particular context is Karl Marx, and he does talk about the loss for workers in terms of job as you get into more capital intensive techniques. Here the idea is, of course, you have the growth in the growth in the new technologies, and the new technologies are now expected to very rapidly replace the labor, right? And on the other hand, you have this capital accumulation happening, which is now demanding the new labor. So one is likely to kind of overcome the other. But what he has pointed out is that unemployment is likely to grow. Why? Because the displacement effect of the technological change is likely to be much greater than the capital accumulation effect of creating more demand for the new workers. So in that context, it is expected that unemployment will come into picture, because the technology which we are talking about is capital intensive. It is going to displace the labor, though there might be a positive effect, but that may not be so large so as to overcome the negative effect as such. As we know, Shampeter did talk about the innovation coming in form of the new product, new processes, organizational innovation. So one very important point there is it require that we should understand the differences in the product, process, organization, marketing, innovation, and accordingly understand the impact of that innovation on the employment as such. Yes, clearly the channel through which the product innovation or the process innovation is likely to now change the requirement of the labor is definitely going to be different. Now, when we talk about process innovation, which is clearly labor saving, we are looking for the ways of doing things much more efficiently, much more perfectly, and at a reduced cost as such. So, any cost reduction influence of the process innovation is clearly going to influence the demand of the labor by the employers as such. Now, next, when we talk about the product innovation, there you will find that the answer may not be as straightforward, because when the new products come into picture, what we realize is that lot more growth, demand dynamism also comes into picture. You realize that suddenly there is an increase in the demand and people are now using this new product, getting used to it. Much more incremental innovations are happening on that, initially following from a very radical maybe a product as such. There can be maybe quality improvements happening. The variety of the products which are available to the consumer is rather expanding, and in view of that, there is an overall growth in the demand. When that happens, then whether it will very straightforwardly negatively influence the labor requirement is not very clear, because it is likely to offset the any kind of a negative impact which may happen in few industries which are now kind of getting out or becoming obsolete. Like I gave you an example of the video cassettes. So some of these let us say video parlors got used to buying the CDs and then maybe renting the CDs, so they moved ahead with the technology. However, over a period of a time, what you realize that with the OTT platforms now this kind of video parlors or CD parlors have become completely obsolete. So these shops are in a way are not working. But on the other hand, you realize the content which is now available on the OTT platforms is rather increasing, and it is now bringing in employment for a lot more new actresses, technicians, people who may not be initially getting in this kind of an exposure. So as the content required on OTT platforms is rather increasing, bringing in lot more employment for the another class or of a labor as such. So definitely there is going to be a disrupting effect. There is going to be a negative impact. But in case of a product innovation, because of the dynamism that might be witnessed, it is not likely that it is going to completely either offset. It can be greater than that also. Now, apart from that, the literature also pointed out that organizational innovations are going to have something much more impact on the in employment as such. One very important way of organizing the production, which we have seen and that has changed, which we talked about, is, if you remember, the globalization of the production, where what we witnessed was that the companies, instead of sourcing the product from within the particular, let us say, company, firm, or maybe even within the same country as such, is now reorganizing the production, where the various components which are required to bring together a particular product, a modular product as such, are now being sourced from the different countries. Now, if that happens, clearly the influence on the labor requirement of within the company, which is now going to focus mostly on their core technologies rather, as compared to maybe their non-core. So those are also being reduced within. If they are now shifting from to other countries, then the employment requirement within the country will also be rather changed. So organizational innovation can also have a very strong impact on the way the firms are organizing, are demanding labor, even not only within a firm, within the countries also. In fact, we have witnessed this kind of a conflict among the countries also, where you find that with the ICT, most of the jobs are now being shifted to the different countries, and the term has also been talked about, the jobs has been Bangalored, where the IT related jobs has shifted to India from maybe countries like America and Europe as such. So clearly, when trying to understand the influence of innovation, particularly on the employment and the demand for the labor, we have to be cognizant of the fact that what is it that we are talking about. Are we talking about a product innovation, or we are talking about process innovation, or we are talking about the organization innovation? Now here, one can always see that whether that difference will actually matter. Now, if you go back to our discussion on the how the product life cycle model, where we talk about initially a novel product is introduced, the product becomes standardized, then in order to produce the product as a cheaper cost, then clearly the process of how the particular product is being produced, also a lot more innovation happens there. Process also becomes rather more standardized, and then again the product is in a matured market, process is matured, and then it reaches a particular saturation level. Now so you will find that if that is the case, that means we might have to understand them together, and the separation again will has to be looked again in terms of what we are talking about. Are we talking about the same product and the process to produce it, or we are talking about the different products, and the difference in that case may not matter also. So again, one has to be cognizant of the fact that yes, there can be differences in the way the impact may come from, particularly talking from the type of innovation. However, sometimes there might be an overlap between the type of innovation we are talking about, and the difference may actually not matter as such. Now we will see that how in the new Schumpeterian, particularly the structural and evolutionary approach, this issue of employment has been addressed with respect to the technological change. One very clear and straightforward analysis which comes from this is that there is the nature of the technological change is disequilibrating. That means whatever the equilibrium is existing before that, it is going to create a disequilibrium. There is going to be a change. There is going to be the status quo is now not going to continue as such. If that happens, so this has been established. So everyone understands that technological change, when we are talking about, it has this particular nature, it has this particular characteristics. That is, it is going to create a disequilibrium. Now, having understood that, clearly what will happen because of this disequilibrium, there would be a destruction of the existing jobs. Whatever the way the things has being done, there is going to be a change. There is going to be destruction on that part. However, one also understands and realizes that there is going to be a creation aspect of it also. So if the jobs are now being destroyed in one particular sector, like I told you about the video parlors or the CD parlors, which the shopkeepers are now not able to sustain, but at the same time, because of increased demand in the content, you find lot more technician in the entertainment industries, and actresses, etc. are now being demanded. So on one hand, there is going to be a destruction, and again there is going to be a need, more demand, requirement of the labor on the other hand as such. Now the importance, if we want to understand this relationship, what is it that we need to understand? We need to understand where and to what extent jobs are created, and also where they are being destroyed. If that is the case, now we have already understand it's a highly dynamic process. Why? Because the adoption of the technology can be different. It may require different skill sets. The case of OTT platform is a very obvious kind of an example in this case, right? So the process is also very dynamic. The pace might be, the adoption pace might also be very different, and as a result the skill requirement is also going to be different. So one has to understand the change, technological change and its impact on employment, keeping all these factors into consideration. First of all, one agrees that there is a disequilibrating nature of the technological change. Certain jobs will be created, others will be destroyed. We have to understand to what extent and where that creation happens, to what extent and where that destruction happens, taking into consideration the dynamism of the particular process. The process of adoption of the technology can also vary, and most importantly the skill requirement can also vary in terms of where the jobs are created vis-a-vis where the jobs are being destructed. Now why this particular point is very important, that is of the requirement of the different skill set, because one can always say that if there is a creation there is a destruction. Why not, wherever the destruction can happen, people can go and work in the areas where the creation is going on, right? So why is it that the people who were running video parlors now go and join the entertainment industry? Here in that sentence also, very clearly you can see it is not possible, because that kind of an absorption of the labor from one place where the destruction has happened to a place where the creation activity is now going on is going to be very different. People shifting from one area would require maybe reskilling, need to update their education as such. So this process is not very straightforward, and hence the need to understand these differences become very important. Clearly, speed at the pace which this happens is also important. Now, frictional unemployment, when people are shifting between the jobs, they will realize that they are leaving their position in one company, they go and get a job into the another one. But when we talk about the technology unemployment, you will find that it is now very easy. The speed of the absorption from one sector to the another is going to be very different. Like I've already highlighted to you, the need to reskill, to update their education, the need to also be a very fast learner, be able to grasp the opportunity and be very agile and shift from one sector to another. Most importantly, there is a different impact of product, process and organization, which we have already talked about. However, at the same time, there is a potential for an overlap. So while understanding the differences, one can always be very careful about the overlaps, need to understand and focus that if there are overlaps, how we can account for those.